Thanks for listening to this podcast of Trending with Timmerie. If you haven't already subscribed, please catch us wherever you love to listen to your podcast, from the Relevant Radio app to Apple, YouTube, you name it, we are there. And if you listen on Apple Podcasts, please be sure to go and give us a 5-star review to help other people discover the podcast. Anything you share in terms of episodes, whether it's texting it to a friend, posting on social media, helps to build up the kingdom for God, to help confront the challenging issues we face as a culture, but with joy, with hope, and with an eternal perspective where our faith collides with everyday life, bringing eternal principles to help us live our life joyfully. Okay, so there's been a 900% increase in vasectomies. Fascinating. Urologists nationwide are reporting this as pretty much an immediate response to Roe v. Wade. Men going and signing up to get snipped, in other words. I remember the first time I actually heard women regularly talking about their husbands obtaining vasectomies, and I was absolutely horrified. I was horrified. I remember I was teaching a Pilates class, and one woman just says, "Oh yeah, my husband got snipped today," and then a couple other ladies say, "Oh yeah, mine too, a couple years ago," or this and that. And I'm sitting here thinking, how humiliating for these women to be talking about this, about their husbands in this way. So that was my first reaction. But then second, I really was kind of thinking, do men just talk about women, going on birth control and talking about it so blasely as if it's not a big deal at all? Well, at that time, this was probably about 8 or 9 years ago, I started looking into vasectomies because I was curious, but from two perspectives. One, of course, understanding that the Catholic Church has a big no to vasectomies. It's in opposition to the gift of life and being open to life, but it's also in opposition to the union we're called to as spouses in intimacy. There's a union that can't occur as God created it to actually occur. And so as I was following kind of some of the interesting stories, I've shared before that I have various autoimmune diseases and food allergies. Well, I started coming across all of this research on vasectomies, and it truly is the dirty little secret of the urologist community. I want to share with you a little bit of what I found out. It is absolutely fascinating to me. And by the way, we're going to talk a little bit later about the gift of being a dad. Why is being father a good thing? And what can we do to foster the idea and desire for fatherhood in men, young and middle-aged today, who have maybe been turned off to it? The number is 1-888-914-9149. In fact, Joseph from Lodi, California is calling now to share about why he wasn't open to children. I want to hear, did you want kids at some point? What changed your mind about having children? Joseph, please share.
Thank you, Timmerie, for what you do. First of all, I wanted children, so I want to set that straight. We were married in the Catholic Church. We were open to children. But I had an inner selfishness to have a year with my wife without, just have intimacy with her. But after 6 months of our marriage, she became pregnant, and I kind of was sort of disheartened by it a little bit. And I remember when she came over and told me she was all excited, and I did not, I try to be excited too. But the life changer was, and it was, I'm very pro-life, Timmerie. My family's been pro-life. My mother, pro-life staunch, and I was raising that, and I even did sidewalk or praying at the abortion facilities, and in that, I was very open to life. We didn't contracept or anything like that. But
you still didn't want children, right?
Yeah, well, I was apprehensive. I mean, I wanted children, but I didn't know what it was like till I saw one born, and that was the life changer for me. It was such a miraculous feeling, and I share that with young guys or young couples, and then they're because to encourage them, because until you experience it, it doesn't make it. It's kind of we're self-centered, but once you experience, or at least I did. It melted me. My life hasn't been the same since, and being more, even more loving of that gift that God gives us to procreate. It's an absolute gift to me, as you well know, and it's indescribable. To be
Praise
able
God.
to
How many
create
children do you
life.
have, Joseph?
We have 6, Timmerie.
Talk about a
We
flip.
have
It's
6.
so interesting that you share this, Joseph, because I think there are a lot of people who are very pro-life, would object to abortion, but aren't interested or maybe aren't open to having children, or absolutely terrified. I don't like children that much. I still wanted children, but I really don't like kids. I think most kids are pretty bratty, in my opinion, just in the culture we're living in. And sometimes that maternal instinct with other people's children can be pretty hard for me. And I think that what you said with, kind of some of that selfishness of saying, I don't want kids, or I at least want a year or 2 years or 3 years just with me and my wife and not having children yet. It's common, but like you said, you have children. You have your first child. You might be shocked. You might be nervous. You might be calculating the numbers, gentlemen. Let's be real. It's very normal and common, but it changes your life. So I really appreciate that testimony, Joseph. The number's 1-888-914-9149. Gentlemen, did you at some point not want children and change your mind about having kids? I would love to hear. Do tell. Either give me a call or on social media now, you can share. This is relevant because there's been a 900% increase in the number of vasectomies occurring since Roe v. Wade. Now, what's interesting is in the urologist community, normally there are far more requests for vasectomy reversals than actual vasectomies. Now, this is listed in a lot of the news that's come out over the last couple of weeks since Roe v. Wade, but it's also a known fact in the urologist community, because there's a dirty little secret, and that is the medical fallout of how negatively vasectomies impact many men. In fact, I see statistics, they vary, but there's really showing about 33%. So about 1 in 3 men who go through a vasectomy have very serious health consequences and pain that last a very long time. And if not, until they outright go forward with having a vasectomy reversal. Now, they're not always successful. They are possible. Now, there are 2 reasons why many people change their mind about vasectomies and do the reversal. One is a medical fallout that really impacts at least 1 in 3 men. Second is many men later on change their minds about wanting to have children. In fact, an acquaintance of mine some years ago shared his story about how he and his wife had decided they didn't want to have any more children. Well, lo and behold, years later, he has his come to Jesus moment, this massive conversion back to the faith of his childhood. And he realizes the Catholic Church's call to be open to new life is a good thing. In fact, the way he and his wife had been not open to life by the vasectomy and the fact that they were not engaging in proper marital union because of the union of the spouses and the pleasure that occurs is totally different. In fact, we'll get into some of that, but many men struggle with everything from ED to experiencing pleasure and intimacy when they go through with a vasectomy. And that's not the way God created it to be. He didn't mean for it to be a struggle, but when we try to change how God created the body to function, this is the fallout we're experiencing. In fact, you can check out the International Center for Vasectomy Reversal. They have a ton of information. Their website is dadsagain.com. Now, you don't just have to be a man desiring to be a dad again, but even just someone wanting to learn more about the aftermath and impact of vasectomies. But here are some interesting things. I'll post links in the podcast notes for today's show to some of these resources if you want to dig a little further. Now, medical doctor Sheldon Marks wrote a great piece for the International Center for Vasectomy Reversal. Talks about how vasectomy reversals cost anywhere from $800 to over $80,000. The usual vasectomy reversal cost is about $8,700. That's actually what their international organization charges for vasectomies, and they have a 99.5% success rate. Now, this is important because a lot of people will seek out vasectomies, but you kind of pay for what you get. And so it's important that if this is something that maybe you or someone you know has been through, to really do your medical homework and to have proper medical care done. Now, As I was doing research a couple years ago on vasectomies, I came across various online chat rooms, places such as Reddit, where people were coming out sharing their experiences about vasectomies, in a place that I think many men otherwise might feel a little uncomfortable sharing, but here finally found a place. Now, it's been interesting because some of these articles on Reddit have been booming over the last couple weeks. In fact, many men, young men in particular, who were going in thinking about having a vasectomy, whose minds completely changed after reading this Reddit stream. In fact, we'll post a link to the Reddit stream on social media because you need to read this about much of the fallout and pain that so many people experience. And at the end of the day, even after a couple, 3 surgeries later, what many of these men find is the best thing to do is go forward with a vasectomy reversal, going back to the way God intended the body to function. Well, why is there such a fallout from vasectomies? Well, let's be clear. Just like there's an aftermath for women who take hormonal birth control, and we chemically alter our bodies, the same thing is happening for men. I think the bottom line question is, what happens to the sperm? The body still produces sperm. We'll get to that in just a second. Now, you can check out the Population Research Institute. They have some great information on the side effects for vasectomies for men. Now, this is important because what we do is when we take the design for the human person, the proper function of the body, and try to thwart, change, or manipulate it, there's a fallout. Kevin Haber is the author of If It Works, Don't Fix It, What Every Man Should Know Before Having a Vasectomy. It's a book that you can pick up. We'll post a link to that book on social media, actually. We'll make sure we get that up. Patrick will post that for us. So here's the deal. Again, I mentioned earlier about 1 in 3 men experience some form of long-term post-vasectomy pain. Now, what's interesting is when a vasectomy occurs, men still produce sperm at a rate of about 500,000 cells per minute. So the question is, what happens to all of these sperm cells that are still being produced in high quantities but are not being released anywhere? Well, sperm cells build up pressure in the epididymis portion of the testicles, which eventually leads to a rupture from the pressure. Now, where does that go? Well, sperm naturally are quite active and have very strong enzymes that make them capable of doing such things such as penetrating the outer layer of the cell. Or if you didn't know this, fun fact, if a woman's been sleeping with multiple sexual partners, the sperm actually fight each other and try to kill each other off. They're actually a very, very, very potent, strong, and active cell. So what happens when vasectomies occur is that it actually leads the rupturing of the blood-testis barrier. So the blood-testis barrier is completely ruptured with a very strong power through breaking through the tissue. So what happens is a man's immune system is not accustomed to active sperm inside his body. It's meant to be extracted or leave the body, leave the bloodstream, but instead these sperm are now in the bloodstream. So what happens is that the body kicks into an autoimmune response, kind of the way autoimmune disorders work. We understand that the body creates antibodies rejecting whatever it's having an autoimmune reaction to. So what's happening in this case is the body's having an autoimmune reaction attacking, going after the sperm. So the body in a traditional autoimmune response starts to reject itself. Medical doctor H.R. Roberts, who is a huge advocate and has been researching the issue of vasectomies for 25 years, says no other operation performed on humans ever approaches the degree and duration of multiple immunological responses that occur in the post-vasectomy state. He calls this the dirty little secret of the urology trade. And it's very, very common, but again, what man wants to talk about these problems in that area? And also, many men don't understand, because people claim there are no side effects, and this is great because there are no consequences when it comes to sex inside of marriage, outside of marriage, infidelity, or whatever. They think that's the benefit of vasectomies. And don't get me wrong, I understand many people are lauding men right now who are going out and getting vasectomies instead of putting the pressure of seeking an abortion, or the woman being the person who has to use birth control, the man's taking care of the job. Okay, you could argue that, but what I'm talking about is the medical fallout when we ignore the intended design for the human body, and when men just rashly, such as the last couple weeks, are going out and obtaining vasectomies. Again, this goes against the Catholic Church's teaching, and I find it so fascinating time and time again that when we look at what the Catholic Church teaches, the Catholic Church is so human-centered and scientific. What the Church states long ago is confirmed in research and studies and the medical data. So let's talk for just a moment about the dirty little secrets of the urology trade when it comes to vasectomies. Again, I mentioned earlier that vasectomy reversals are far more common than the request for vasectomies themselves, other than the last probably couple weeks, as there's been a 900% increase in the number of vasectomies occurring. Diseases that set in and are common side effects of vasectomy include everything from prostate cancer, rheumatoid arthritis, ED, chronic testicular pain, chronic inflammation, epididymitis and prostatitis from pain, testicular cancer. There's also highly increased incidence of everything from infections, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, other forms of cancer, diabetes, multiple sclerosis, a ton of autoimmune disorders, everything from migraines, liver dysfunction, lymph node enlargement, adrenal gland malfunction, chronic inflammation, and testicular pain. Who wants that? I don't think any man would sign up for this if he actually knew. There's also circulation problems, lifelong autoimmune allergic reactions to foods. What man wants that? Liver dysfunction, loss of libido. Nobody wants that. Lupus, prostate cancer. I could go on and on. Increased risk of staph infection and kidney stones. Oh my goodness. My mom had kidney stones. I've known a number of people to have kidney stones. My mom said that kidney stones was far worse than childbirth. Gentlemen, you do not want kidney stones. This is the fallout of vasectomies. What happens when we ignore the human-centered and God-given design of the human person in our bodies. The fact that God created us as human beings to be made a gift to one another. This is the physiological material reality of male and female, that union that was so clear when Adam and Eve first discovered each other in the garden. When Eve is created and Adam goes, bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. He saw that physical complementarity revealed so much more in a spiritual complementarity of being a gift. See, marriage, as we know in the Catholic understanding, is ordered toward parenthood. Once you marry, you're called to procreate, that is to have children and to educate them. Why? Because this is a part of human flourishment for the married spouses, of human excellence. It's difficult. Having children changes you and grows you. The Catholic Church got it right in the encyclical Humanae Vitae that came back out in the 60s, talking about birth control. It talked about responsible parenthood with using self-control. That is a virtue. It talked about how every sexual act was meant to be entered into unitively, that is for the good of the spouses, and procreatively, open to human life. Vasectomies prevent both things from happening. It decreases pleasure, prevents the proper union from occurring, and it doesn't allow for new human life to occur. When we reject the gifts we are meant to make with our lives, that total self-sacrifice, we implode on ourselves. And in the cases of vasectomies, this is literally what's happening, an implosion in the body causing all of this medical fallout that no one's talking about. This self-implosion from an attempted modification of the purpose of life rather than self-sacrifice that we're called to. I think of St. Paul's letter to the Ephesians in chapter 5 when he talks about how husbands are called to love their wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. that he might sanctify her, having cleansed her by the washing of water with the word, that he might present the church to himself in splendor, without spot or wrinkle or any such thing, that she might be holy and without blemish. Gentlemen, this is the great mission you are called to. This is how you're meant to find a spouse. Who are you willing to die for? Who are you willing to give yourself totally for? This is what we need to foster in men today.